Is it recording? I think so.
Yeah.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this day's webinar on how to break free from perfectionism, 3 steps to start thriving. And your host is me. I'm Alan Rojas Yacolca. I'm Peruvian. You can hear it from my Peruvian accent, Latino accent. And I'm also the director of the Andes Institute. This is one of our last activities of the year. And I'd like to start talking about what our afternoon is going to be about. This is the agenda, whoops. And first, we're going to be talking about perfectionism as a challenge, as a problem, how it limits our potential. Then I'll be going to be talking about 3 steps we can take to break free from it. Change starts with the first step. Then we're going to be doing some processing. We're going to be playing around with logosynthesis, the usual. And then at the end of it, I'm going to be talking about an opportunity that it's open to you all to take. If you don't take it, that's also okay, but you're going to be walking away with a tool you can use to support yourselves along the way. Now, this is a 1-hour webinar, so there's much to share. I'll try to offer as much as possible in this little time. And after the session, you're going to be receiving the recording. I just have one single rule for my webinars or meetings, and the single rule is you can always ask questions or share a comment. So you're not interrupting. This is a conversation on a one-way street. So it's a double-way street. Feel free to make comments or ask questions, and I'll entertain them as we go. If you feel shy, you can also write them on the chat box, and then I'll just take a look at that and bring it up, and we'll take it from there. There we go. So, perfectionism is an issue that is dear to my heart because, as some of you may have heard, this is something that has been part of my life for many years. It's been a learning journey, and I'm quite grateful that it happened because I've learned a lot from it, and it's allowed me to be here today. When I was 6 years old, I was, as all of us, I was learning to write and count. And I recall this one day, I was sitting down at the desk. My mother was to my right, and I was learning to write my name and small things, kind of little words here and there, like with pins and circles. And it was not easy for me. And I was sort of like grabbing a pencil, trying to write. But things were not working out for me. So I was always, kind of like erasing with what do you call this, an eraser in English? And there was smudges on the paper. It must have been around 5 p.m. in the afternoon while I was doing my homework. And then I recalled that my father came. He came into the room and said, hello. He looked behind my shoulder and over my shoulder, looked at the page and said, like, what is this? It's not good. He took the notebook, tore off the page and said, do it again. Then he walked off. And I got stunned. I was frozen. And I was hurt. That had taken me a lot of effort to do that. And all of a sudden it was gone. And what I learned from that experience was either I do things right or something's wrong is going to happen. Because I totally felt like no matter what I did was not good enough. And so very early on in life, I learned that I had to do things right or something wrong was going to happen. And ever since that moment, I guess I felt like a little character in the picture in the screen. I was quite anxious and frustrated over the things I did. I had set unrealistic high standards. I was expecting a lot from myself, even beyond my age or my level of competence. And I was so scared of making mistakes. And if you've ever struggled with perfectionism, I'm sure you realize that mistakes can feel daunting. Like there's something that you really don't want to make, and that feels like a very sensitive area. And to avoid them, we become so critical of ourselves. We start, setting not only high standards, but like, this is not good enough. Should be perhaps, the picture is not totally right. You have to turn a little bit more. There is good. So you start being like really detailed, like really picky with details. And at some point at work, if you've ever had any executive or leadership positions in an organization, the organizations love that. They love people who are organized, oriented to details, who have things under control, who can predict whatever can happen and are ready to manage everything, which in a way are the strength of, having this orientation to perfectionism. But the problem is that sometimes we do not know how to turn off the switch. And so whatever may seem as a strength, if we don't know how to turn off the switch, it just comes home with us and then starts invading and being very pervasive into our relationships or everyday living. And so self-criticism is an issue. We have this strong need to control everything because we may be scared of something may be lost. We may experience a loss. And at the end, we may be quite sensitive towards the words of others because we care about recognition of our work and our ideas. And we may start being dependent on them. And so for quite a long time, when I was very young, perfectionism was something that really placed limits on my living, on whether it was in the university or my first work or even my relationship. I wanted things to be right or else, And I was not aware of that. I was just aware of this anxious feeling of things having to be right and trying to be in control all the time. Has it ever happened to you? And this is an honest question. And if it ever has happened to you, I'd like you just to nod your head to get a feeling of the sense of the room. Do you relate? Does it resonate? Okay, I'm not alone here. That's good. And so if we look beyond this, if we try to look beyond the surface level, internally, we may experience either as a voice or as a thought that what we do is not as it should be. We have this sense of comparison. Like you look at what you did, it's like, this could be better. It's not as it should be. It's like, and sometimes we do arrive to phrase it as like a sentence like this must be perfect or it must be perfect. Sometimes there is no consciousness of this, but we just get a sense like things are not as they should be, and we're not entirely satisfied or ever satisfied with what we do. And if this becomes something cyclical, frequent, recurrent, then this long-standing sense of insatisfaction with what we do turns out into a question, or may turn out into a question that feels like, what's wrong with me? Like, I'm not good enough. And then all of a sudden, it's no longer about what we do, it becomes about who I am. And from that moment on, we start spiraling down. And we may come up with a lot of creative solutions to try to cope with that. When we started going that way, it may feel so hurtful that we may start smoking, or some people drink, some people become addicted to purchases online or video games, or have it what you may. We start to try to cope, to try to appease what's happening inside. Some way to cope is just to simply avoid the situation altogether. And so some of you are familiar, I certainly am, with procrastination. The situation becomes so stressful that we just like, maybe we'll just do that later. And we start to avoid or set it for later because it just feels too stressful to handle. And internally, the spiral feels like this. It first starts like feeling frustrated over the result about what I'm doing. Then I start thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen if this is not right? We'll start feeling anxious or scared about the future, right? And then we'll start taking it on ourselves and thinking, what have I done wrong here? This should be better. This is not good enough. Start criticizing. And then we feel guilty for what we have done. It's like, this is not good. I've done not good. What may happen later? And then suddenly, at some point, there's a switch. And it turns from guilt into shame. It's like, okay, so if this is not good enough, maybe I'm not good enough. And then we take it upon ourselves. And then this becomes overwhelming. Some people depressed. Some people, just to avoid the whole situation, like I said, may avoid the project or the task or simply abandon it altogether. And then we start living with a sense of regret over what we have not done or achieved. We have put off life, and there's a certain sense of like, it's part of my life that I have put on pause for a while, and I want to do it, but somehow I'm still avoiding it, and I'm not ready for it, but I need to get it done now. And there's this sort of feeling like where I'm pulled into different directions at the same time without being able to move forward in any of them, right? And if that becomes, again, too stressful, we may just try to find solutions to distract. And then distraction may become even a habit. People start talking about, people now colloquially talk about ADHD as this form of something I have and I'm struggling with. And sometimes if you look closer, zoom in, what they're saying is I'm feeling disconnected and distracting a lot in life just because there are several places in life I cannot handle right now. And I cannot go there because they're touchy places, sensitive places. So, and it all can start with this unrealistic sense of expectations we place upon ourselves or high standards on what we do, you know? As a result of it, perfectionism may feel like, in perfectionism, we may feel like there's our sense of self, of who we are, may be tied very much or is conditional to performance, to results, Thus, failing becomes I'm a failure, and that's unbearable. There was this one time I was talking with a friend of mine, and I really do not remember exactly the topic, but I mentioned failing. He's like, no, that word does not exist in my vocabulary, he said. And I was like, but we do fail sometimes. He's like, no, I don't fail, he said. That's not acceptable. I have to do things right. And that reminded me of my old self when I was in my 20s, because that was me. And sometimes I must accept, sometimes it still can be hard on myself. It's not as often as before because I've worked on it. But still, perfectionism can be quite pervasive. And what it does and what it is, it affects our confidence, our clarity, our sense of compassion with others and ourselves. In times where perfectionism is driving our life, we may become too critical on others, not just ourselves, and this affects our relationships. But it also places a limit on our creativity, on our capacity to innovate and do things differently, even to experiment and try new things, you know? And as a result, it places also a limit on our courage to try new things. Rings a bell? You can nod your head if it rings a bell. It does for me. Okay, so we're on the same page. So let's talk about where this comes from. And one of the topics that I'm quite fond of is transactional analysis. It's a theory on why we are the way we are. And what transactional analysis says, much like my story when I was a kid, is that our early relationships plays an influence on who we are today. In my case, what I perceived when I was 6 years old in the relationship with my father was that I was either doing things right or something wrong would happen. The message that I got from him, not verbally, but from the action was, you must be perfect to earn my approval, to just totally turn off the page, right? And that's what I recorded in my head. That's what I learned. I learned I must be perfect. There was no alternative. And that stuck with me and was there with me for a while. That's why this arrow goes in this way, from parent to child. That's the message that I got. And for many years, I was not aware of it, but it did feel like kind of like a ghost somewhere around me, sort of like whispering, you gotta do things right, you must be perfect, and that's why I place a little ghost here. Because you cannot see it, you cannot hear it, but it's there and it's placing such high expectation on you. And the thing with these messages is that you're either verbally told those messages or you conclude them from the experience you had early on, and such messages may stay frozen in your system, like an old MP3, like an old song in your system, or like an old record. And if we zoom in, sometimes we may even identify who that comes from. Who did I learn that from? And it may appear in a personal space, in space around me. And suddenly this presence or internal voice or inner dialogue, if you want to call it, or inner parent, suddenly appears and is like, oh yeah, that was with my father, or that was with my teacher in primary school, or that was the priest, or that was etc. Someone did or said something and I got that message from them and it got stuck. And that's at the root of the struggle. And so when it comes to about breaking free from perfectionism, it is about those messages or those beliefs And those messages or beliefs happen in several categories, which I call scenarios because they do happen like scenarios on a movie, on a theater play, on scenes. And they can be about self-expectations, expectations we place upon ourselves. It can be about our worthiness or how worthy we feel, how okay we feel about ourselves. It can be about a success or achievement, and this is how we define success or how we define failure. Is failure even an option? And to master any subject, we kind of do to experiment and practice to learn about it and become good at it. But if we don't fail, how can we learn? The best learnings come from failing. And so if we're not permitted to fail, how are we supposed to learn and succeed? And of course, well-being. We gotta learn to find an ebb and flow in at work. When is it time to zoom in and give it all? And when is it time to step back and just wait and, let it rest, let it simmer, let it stay there for a couple of days and then come back with fresh eyes to continue the work? Have you ever feel pressed to do something, to create a program, to write an article, to prepare a presentation, to do something, and you felt like you had to do it in one sitting, in one day, or just 1 week, like nonstop, and your system was suffering all throughout it? Whereas if you learn to find your ebb and flow, you can work at it for a couple of hours, then stop, and then come back maybe like 2 hours later after a nap, or maybe the next day. And you can find ways to stay creative without burdening yourself in the process. So we need to pay attention to all these scenarios so that we can find what's stopping us, what's the beliefs. And to do this is what I find my 3-step model. There are things we can take into account. And if you're good at exploring this by yourself, you can use it directly. This is what I do in session really with my clients and in my programs, for example. So when it comes to perfectionism, we go and we take one of these scenarios. It can be about mastery of self-expectations, worthiness, achievement or success, or health or well-being. We take one and then we start exploring what's limiting me here, right? So what's the message that's stopping me here? You sit down with yourself and you're thinking, I have to write this article, but it's not working out for me. Somehow I don't find creativity, I feel stuck. I'm lacking ideas. Whenever I just sit in front of the laptop and look at the screen, that the white screen is like I'm blank. And we start exploring there. So you're feeling blank. Okay, so you go blank. When you go blank, how you feel? I have this pressure in my chest, this lump on my throat, and start feeling anxious. And when you feel anxious, what else do you feel? I feel scared, up to an 8. Because what if I prepare this proposal, others see it, and they just laugh at me and say, this is ridiculous, this is not good enough. This is not good enough. Yeah. That's how I feel. I'm not good enough. Bam. And that's the message that's been stopping me. So I take that. That's step number 2. I know the message now. I'm not good enough. So I can just stay there and process it directly. I'm not good enough and see what happens. Or maybe explore a little further. So who told you you were not good enough? Or where did you learn that from? Nobody told me, but, ever since I was a child at home, I lived with my mother and father and my brother. And my brother was so good at school. My parents always praised him. But me, I was just a regular kid and I was not that good in class. And my fathers never told me anything, but they always praised him. So compared to him, I was not good enough. That they never said that, but that's how I always felt. And I remember this one time we were sitting at the table. It was Sunday. My brother was sharing his achievements at school and they were praising him. And then they said, what about you? And I was like, yeah, I'm good. They were like, oh, yeah, good. They looked so disappointed. I could see it in their faces. And from those faces, I got that message. So you can, once you find that, then you can work with that, the faces of disappointment. That's what I got the message. I was not good enough. And then you go into step number 3 and you process it. And if you've worked with logosynthesis, you know how to do it. It's quite simple. You run the basic protocol and then you take it from there and see if there's anything else blocking you. And so that's something we can do. And I'd like to have a little experiment with you guys so that you can experience how this can be done. So if you're up to it, I'd like to invite you to maybe find a comfortable place in your chair. Just maybe sit up straight or just relax. Just find a comfortable place in your chair and think about a task, something you've been willing to do, something maybe from work or from your personal life, a task you may have been struggling with, and you may feel that it's connected to perfectionism, maybe. Just let your intuition guide you and choose one task. And when you got the task, please nod your head. Okay. So I know you got it. Good. So now that you're thinking about that task, I'd like you to just go back to that moment where you were trying to do that task and just observe how you feel in your body. Look if there's any stress in your body and where is it? Maybe in your chest or your throat or somewhere else. And when you notice the stress there, what physical sensation do you feel there? Is it like pressure? Is it a contraction? Heat? The pinching? An emptiness? What is it? And just notice it. And when that happens, when that sensation happens there, what emotion do you feel? Is it a sense of guilt or shame or fear or anger or sadness? What do you feel there? Mhm. And when that's the case, what do you tell yourself in that moment? You're feeling that sensation in that part of your body. You feel that emotion. And what do you tell yourself about the task? And what do you tell yourself about yourself when you struggle with this task? And just notice that. And if you cannot hear a message, just let your intuition tell you what the message is. What do you tell yourself about yourself when you struggle with that task? I am. Mhm. Is there any other message that you perceive? It may feel like a critical message or a critical voice. What do you tell yourself about yourself when you struggle with a task? What do you tell yourself about others? What will others say when you struggle with that task? So by now, you may have found one or more messages that may feel limiting. And maybe this is something you were told, or maybe it was a conclusion you arrived to. Did anyone ever told you this? Did anyone ever tell you this? Or maybe something happened and then you concluded this. From whom did you learn this? If anyone ever said that. And you may know who that person is, or if you observe the space around you, somewhere in the space around you, there may be someone from whom you got those messages. Maybe you perceive a silhouette, or maybe you perceive a clear picture. There's a presence somewhere around you at the origin of those messages. Even if it's an unknown presence, just locate it somewhere around you by intuition. Your intuition is powerful. And so now I will invite you to repeat a sentence after me. You will repeat it, and then you don't have to do anything. Just observe what happens. Please repeat after me. I retrieve all my energy bound up in this presence and all their messages, and I take it to the right place in myself, and you let it work. I remove all non-me energy related to this presence and all their messages, and I remove it from all my cells, all my body, and my personal space, and I send it to where it truly belongs, out and away from my system. I retrieve all my energy, bound up in all my reactions to this presence and all their messages and everything that presence represents. And I take it to the right place in myself. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes and come back. And let's talk a little bit. What's happening now? What have you noticed in this exercise? And if you'd like to share, you may open your mic and just share with the rest. And in the meantime, I invite you to write in the chat box, what was your level of distress from 0 to 10 in the beginning? And what is your level of distress now from 0 to 10? Just to get a sense of where we are. Okay, 7 to 5. How about the rest? How has your level of distress changed? 9 to 2, 9 to 6. Okay. So there's still something else left to process. 7 to 3. Okay. Would anyone like to share their experience?
I'll share. I think from the input in the beginning, when you were talking about fears, fear to make mistakes, and then towards the last that sentence from the messages, what was strong for me is finding the energy to put in the rightful place, because most of it felt like, I guess going to two felt like some of it are self-judgments that comes from what if I make the mistake, and the heart of that fear of making mistake is that mental message that says, actually, I become more of a judge of myself than the first messenger or the whole history of what was part of the fear of making this mistake and fitting into the old messages that says, actually, and I think for me it was edging on some of the racist messages on the type of a schooling system, that the school is not happening or giving me messages now But when I'm confronted with the same situation, the judge is stronger, but I've become that judge.
Okay, so you were judging yourself.
Yes. And I think
Uh,
the release from dissolving that energy has been part of like my own incorporated ways of dealing with the mistakes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you let go of the internal judgment, the fear of mistake goes down.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you,
Thank
Ladira.
you. Thank you.
Mhm.
I found out that it was really related to my mom. And she once, only once, said that she would like me to be more like my sisters. And
Ah,
that's when it started.
right. So she would say something like, you should be more XXX, and that was a message.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you, Jenny.
I grew up in Ireland, and it was a bit like what Lindley said. Um, the systems were very top-down, controlling, shaming, wrong, making it a lot very shame-based. And it was a lot of the education was priests and nuns as well, who were probably the worst at that. So,
Mhm.
that way of controlling through shame sort of was through the whole schooling system. And then I think
Mhm.
it's a way to it was a well, I wouldn't say it's an effective way to control people, but it, yeah, it did. It was a good way of controlling. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Sadly, it works.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Okay. And did you identify the message that was said at the time that was limiting until today?
Yeah, something's so you're going to get something wrong, and there's going to be consequences. Yeah,
Okay.
you'll get it. Yeah, yeah,
Right. Okay. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
I think for me, it was a sense of anticipating criticism, whatever I did.
Oh,
Um, um, there was a saying my parents used to tell me all the time, which is children must be seen and not heard. And I think I wired that to anticipate never being heard. And that's, in the last few weeks, it's just been so painfully, I've had just a terrible time from that belief that sort of led to a series of behaviors in me that had consequence. And I've just been reflecting. It makes me feel really sad, because I just remember, any level of any demonstration of how I was feeling as a child had bad consequences. So I just learned to sort of absolutely be perfect in behavior. Just I knew exactly down to the pin exactly what to do around different adults, school and home. And it's exhausting. I just
it is.
it was just exhausting. And I play it out now. And it's just, oh God, it's just relentless.
Yeah, it can be relentless. I guess in my experience, and what I've heard also from other people is that it's not just that we incorporated those messages from others, then we replay them in our head, and then we become somehow the judge and the person judge at the same time. We split in both parts. And then we are judging ourselves with those messages over and over. And I that's something that I found quite interesting what you said, Carolina, about Children must be seen, not heard. So there was something about I must be silent and perfect, or there will be judgment. Okay. So my recommendation would be to, and this is for all of you and for all, myself included, to continue exploring. So if we get to this part, is couple things we can continue exploring is what was the message said, you know, and what were the consequences? Because consequences can be experienced in two ways. Either we have a fantasy, that means we imagine what could happen, or we have a memory of something that actually happened as consequence that is at the root of those beliefs. So if I say I must be perfect or else, what was the else? Was it something that I imagined or something that happened? And if it's something that happened, neutralizing that memory can help to be freed from that pressure to be perfect, because there's nothing else that scares us anymore into being perfect. Does that help? Okay. Okay. How about you, Fausta? How was it for you? And thank you, Carolina, for sharing.
Yeah, I still I still feel the physical reaction to the thought of starting offering yoga sessions as a yoga teacher. That's the theme that I chose, but there are many similar ones. So it sort of, you know, while doing the sentences, other, you know, related things came up, like if even while I chose one message or belief, during the sentences, other beliefs came up, and I realized it's related to so many other things, and generally something like there's too much to do. This overwhelm is very present.
Okay.
So it was like it, yeah, I don't know. It was more like it unlocked something because it's just too big for the sentences or something. And there was also not one specific presence, but it sort of, yeah, tipped something to unlock, you know, many of these issues that I probably need to take one by one.
Right, right. Like a cucumber, slice by slice.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
Okay, okay. This gives me an idea, maybe for all of us, something that we can also explore. Sometimes when we are struggling with perfectionism, some of the messages that we have received make up an ideal, you know, an ideal profile of who we should be, you know. And I would think, for example, if I'm a yoga teacher, what's the ideal that I should be? And many messages may be targeting there, like I should be X, Y, Z, A, B, etc. Right? So I invite you to, if that's the case, I invite you to make a drawing that represents these messages. And maybe after you make the drawing around it, you can write down those messages. How and what's the ideal of how it should be, you know, what perfect looks like, you know, and it doesn't have to be a perfect drawing. As long as it's a drawing, it's perfect, it's good enough. And then when you're done making the drawing, that representation, and writing down those words that describe this perfect representation of who I should be, then you can say the sentences on that representation. I retrieve all my energy bound up in this representation and everything it represents, and I take it to the right place in myself. I remove all non-me energy related to this representation and everything it represents from all of my cells, from all of my body in the personal space, and I send it to wherever it truly belongs. And the same with the third sentence. And see what happens. Perhaps that can take care of those messages. And if not, you can go one by one. And you can use the sentences on that belief that I should be or that I must be XYZ. And see what happens. Sometimes a bigger representation takes care of it, Sometimes, like you say, you can also need to go slice by slice. So you can try both ways and see how it goes.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mhm.
Alan, could I just add one other thing?
Sure.
I just realized after I'd spoken that sometimes it's not just what happened to me, because I remember being in the classroom and there was a child who was left-handed, and they used to tie his hand behind his, he wouldn't let him write with his left hand, and the teacher came and just punched him in the face when he was writing with his right hand, with his left hand. And sometimes, actually seeing that can be, when it's not directly to you, that can be in the mix as well. I just remembered
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. It's like vicarious learning through others.
Yeah. This will happen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. It's a good point. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anything else you'd like to share, guys?
I just wondered, just listening to everyone, that how you work with the whole concept. The whole concept of perfectionism is an illusion just on its own. That there's ever a perfect family, there's ever a perfect entrance into this life. You start off by crying, first of all, and as well as it is a reverence to have a child being born, but the whole idea of perfectionism is on its own for me, how to neutralize it, because it doesn't really exist, but in the fantasy, it's alive sometimes.
There's no baby
Mm-hmm.
born who want to be perfect. It's not the wish of the baby. It happens during life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I guess it goes back to the cucumber metaphor, right? We have to go slice by slice, processing, every illusion, like you call it, which is true. It's an illusion. It's a fantasy. And then we let go and recover that energy, right? Thank you, Lindy. Carolina?
How do those sentences, saying the sentences, actually work at that subconscious mind of beliefs that seem so embedded? I mean, it's just made me smile. The thought of actually doing a drawing of what perfect looks like. Now that, if anything's going to freeze me, it's that. I'm not going to touch that, because that drawing, if it's not, it's got to be perfect. So I don't even want to start on it, because it's not going to be perfect. The anticipation again is just too much of getting it wrong. So I'm just, I know it's key to logosynthesis, but just try that profound belief level that needs shifting, isn't it? That you don't need to be perfect. Does it just
Right.
does it just take time for the subconscious to hear those sentences being or felt or heard, even if you don't understand how it's working?
Let me put it this way. Think of Jenga, the game Jenga with the bricks right? Sometimes, well, to win in Jenga, you have to pull the brick and put it on top, and it has to be very soft and mindful the way we play with it, right? Otherwise, it all falls down. But in the case of logosynthesis, we want the whole structure to fall down. So sometimes we have to go all the way back to the bottom to actually make the whole thing crumble. But it takes time because we cannot go directly onto the first thing at once. It may be too overwhelming for our system. So we go step by step, and we will first, what comes up for you right now, and process one little bit, and then we'll lead the way to the next thing and the next thing. And next thing you know, we have taken down one big chunk of the whole of it, but it's a process that takes time, right? And it actually really depends on the personal experience that we may have had. There are people whose father or mother were not that strict, that rigid. Other parents really were. So depending on how intense and how frequent the experience that one had affected us, then it may take more time and more work and more process to get there. And for some others, it's not such a big deal. For some of us, it was something that we really had to endure, and it takes a while, you know. But all in all, in a personal experience and the experience of my clients, it does work, fortunately. And there's a huge amount of release, and little by little, we go a long way. It's really lovely to know that. So there's good news about that. Oh, and there's one more trick for you guys. If drawing is not the thing for you, you can pick a post-it, write down maybe the belief you're in the post-it, follow that, and then say the sentences on the piece of paper and everything there, and see what happens. You don't have to draw if it doesn't work for you. You can just write it down on a piece of paper, and then take the energy of the paper and everything written there, and see what happens. So there are several ways you can play with it. I had a client who is a photographer, and she said, I'm trying to process this X situation, you know? And then I told her, why don't you go around the city and take photographs and try to take a photograph that represents that situation, and then process that photograph and everything it represents. And it works as well. So we can find workarounds and ways to work with whatever is there, step by step. Okay, so I have something else for you guys. And I have around 10 minutes or 8. We'll make it. If you'd like to continue working on eliminating these messages or limitations around having to be perfect, then my next program may be of service to you. It's called Freedom to Thrive. And it's about embracing life beyond perfectionism. It's about mastery, it's about worthiness, it's about achievement, and it's about health. And one of the things you may have noticed is we're working with these 4 scenarios. And of course, we need to explore each one of them and then find out what are the limiting, let's say, blockages, and eliminate them. So what I have done is prepare this program where for each of these scenarios, I have created a guide that can lead you on the path to find out what may be limiting you around each of these scenarios. So for example, what's maybe limiting you on the way to mastery, on the way to practice, and learn? Is it maybe a fear of failure, right? Or is it maybe strong expectations on yourself? And then I'm helping you to find what are these limiting patterns around each of these scenarios. And there's a guide for each one. This is especially helpful for those of you who may be willing to develop self-coaching skills, because I'm teaching you there how to work with yourself. Because in session, when we meet, we work ourselves, we work together as a group with exercises, and we also have one-on-one live demonstrations. But this is also good if you want to work by yourself and with yourself, and I'm guiding you through that process. And what each of these guides include, and this is an example of one of those guides, there's an introduction on the scenario, why this situation is important, understanding the root causes. We're going to be talking about fantasies, beliefs, and of course, memories. And I'm breaking down some typical patterns you may struggle with into reactions or manifestations, you know, on the emotional level, mental level, behavioral, physical, and social manifestations. And of course, the consequences of not dealing with this. You know, each of these guides are providing you tools and insights to break free from these perfectionistic patterns and embrace all the possibilities of life can offer you. And what this looks like is a bit like this, you know. For example, those who struggle with procrastination, an easy way for you to recognize it is, you know, taking a look at these reactions. If you struggle with procrastination, you may have noticed that mentally, you may be having racing thoughts, like a mental fog with facing an important task. Oh my God, no, I cannot do this, but what if I do it wrong? What if others criticize me? What if, racing thoughts, what if, you know, emotionally, they may be a relief when we just, you know, avoid tasks, but anxiety and guilt about unfinished work start building up. So you have something to do. When you approach it, you feel like, oh no, I have to do this. I don't know how to do this. This is so overwhelming. And then maybe I'll just put it for like 2 hours and go take a rest or do the house chores. there's that relief when we put it off for later, right? But then when we put it off for later, it's like, oh my God, it's been 2 hours already. I have to do this now. The guilt and inside the build up. That's a way to recognize you're procrastinating. Physically, there's lethargy, that this deep sense of I need to sleep and I'm so tired. But there's also tension in your body, or feeling restless and uneasy. Behaviorally, you distract yourself with an important tasks, buying groceries, cleaning the house, doing some XYZ, and which repeatedly puts off responsibilities. And socially, this may strain relationships due to miscommitments or priorities or promises. This usually happens at work. You promise to do something, you put it up, and then you get in trouble. These are all indications or manifestations of procrastination. And then we can work on how to resolve it. This is part of the program. I teach you how to handle it, and we explore it together. And for each of these guides, I usually give you this kind of hints for at least 4 to 5 typical patterns in each of these scenarios, so that you can know, for example, how to identify if this is happening with you, and then know what to do to handle it. I teach you how to approach that situation using logosynthesis, how to explore it, how to find the blockage, and how to eliminate it using the logosynthesis basic procedure as a self-coaching practice. And if you have issues with that or struggle with that, you come back to the next session and say, hey, I've been working with this, it's not working for me, this is where I get stuck, and I can mentor or coach you on how to move past that blockage. And if you don't want to wait till the next session, you can just write me a message or write to the group, and we can all talk about it and support you, or privately if you would like to talk it privately, right? But there's help for you along the way. We meet every 2 weeks, and in between you have a chance to work on yourself, and then when we meet, you can also work. Also, I'm including some journaling prompts. Is one of my favorite things, and my people like it. I'm including, so if you meet every 2 weeks, that means that there are like at least 10 working days in between our sessions. So I'm offering you 10 journaling prompts for every day, from Monday to Friday. You can pick one question and just work with it. One question once a day, a different question every day to explore your life. Or you can pick one question and then repeat it every day to explore and go further and further and further. You can go broad, you can go deep. It's up to you. Either way, this is allowing you to start exploring and getting to know yourself better, identifying patterns where you're getting blocked. And then you can take, if that helps, that's good. If you struggle, if you get blocked, you can come back, we can talk about it, and I can help you to go take it further. And the questions will vary depending on each scenario. So each guide offers different journaling prompts. This is the logosynthesis basic procedure. I have prepared this little cheat sheet for you to know how to work with it, to help you explore yourself, much like we did today in this exercise we did. This is the same thing, explained step by step. You can learn how to use it. I can coach you how to use it as well. And as you can see, this is kind of like this, the formula here. For every scenario, we get some hints on these patterns that help you identify them. You use the logosynthesis basic procedure to unlock your energy and to release those blockages, and that takes you further and further down your path, releasing all those blockages down to the root. This is the self-help part. Additionally, there's an extra guide, which the previous guides are about the how. This one is about the why, because this is an interesting question we all hold inside. It's like, why is this happening? And we're talking about, from the perspective of TA, transactional analysis, and also the adverse child experiences, to reveal the roots of perfectionism, why this may be happening, and also, of course, the perspective of logosynthesis, which I bring in the session to session. So this guide also comes with examples. I tell case studies and bring stories so that you can get to explore this further and maybe relate to it. There's also some reflection exercises, so that you can find ways to understand yourself better from the point of view of theory, and then find the patterns and eliminate them. If it comes into a summary, this is a bit like the description of the program. There's this part that is self-driven. There's this part that is together with me. The self-driven part includes a theory guide, with case examples to understand the roots of patterns from the point of view of TA and ACEs. The process part, each scenario includes case examples, self-assessment questions, self-exploration and self-coaching, journaling prompts, some easy step experimentations, and the live sessions, it's all about the how and why. We explore your patterns, give examples, we can discuss key insights, you can ask questions at every level. I can take your questions. We can process as a group, but I can also mentor you individually on where you're getting stuck. I can have a live demo to work with you. And optionally, if you'd like to, you can work with me one-on-one, where we can examine and process any limiting patterns you may have. I can also take your questions on either process or the logosynthesis technique as a self-coaching tool, or we can discuss theory or philosophy from different models, depending on what you need. And the most important thing for you to know is this program is focused on your process. This is not about theory. I'm not training you to become a therapist here. This is about your process. My intention is to offer you a broad theoretical framework in simple terms to inform your understanding so that you can understand better your process, so that you operate deeper, in a deeper systematic way as a therapist would. I'm bringing knowledge from the therapy field onto your personal self-development practice so that you understand yourself better. My intention is to create a space, a learning space that offers you opportunities beyond the sessions or in between the sessions so that you can benefit more from, chances to identify and eliminate these blockages or limiting patterns on your path. And I have a special gift because these are the holidays coming. So whoever joins my next program, I'm including a free one-on-one session so that you can work with me for free in anything you would like to work. And you can take that session to work from any point of view, whether you want to eliminate a process or have questions about the theory or the method, etc. I'm there to entertain your questions. And yep, that's that. And these are the main ideas behind the program, right? If perfectionism leaving you anxious, drained, never truly satisfied with what you achieve, the program offers you a chance to, for example, learn how to set compassionate, realistic goals, how to embrace in reality growth and self-kindness and resilience when working with what you want. It's not about setting smart goals, really. It's more about how you relate to your goals, how you relate with what you want, so that you feel really relaxed and confident to achieve what you want. And it's about building the inner confidence, internal confidence, to feel good enough with what you do. Yes, this early morning at 4 o'clock, my morning, your afternoon, Fausta very kindly wrote me a message saying, hey, I was trying to download this guide and I couldn't. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, that was my bad, because I said I must have done something wrong. And in quite honesty, I had forgotten to activate the form. And so I wrote back to her, thank you for letting me know. So 3 hours later, my morning, 7 o'clock, 7:30, I went online and activated the form and it worked. And what surprised me from that moment was my reaction, because I thought, oh my God, I forgot. Sorry, thank you. There was no shame. There was no guilt, just the realization that I can do something different and just move forward. And that's what I want to offer you, We will mess up in life. It's natural. We will, we fuck up. Let's put it that way. And we can learn from those moments and then move forward without the guilt, without the shame, without the pressure. We can build that inner confidence by removing all these limiting messages we have picked up from the past. And it's very possible. And that also means that we can redefine what success means. In a very wise way, Linda Witt today talked about illusions, and we may have this illusion about what success truly means. It's not about making things well, the first one in the right way and being, the first in the world. It's about learning to get there step by step, and sometimes messing up and experimenting and failing and learning from that. But we need to have the permission to experiment, fail, and learn if we're ever going to be masters at anything. And that's also what redefining success means. It's about embracing failure as a part of life, a healthy part of life, and learning to feel comfortable amid failure. Doesn't mean not feeling sad, because sometimes it's sad feeling, but it's about embracing it and being able to move forward through it and learning how to self-care without guilt. It's important to learn when to stop, when to rest, learning to take a nap sometimes in the middle of the day, and there's nothing wrong with it. I've just discovered it last year. It's so good to take a nap. And for those of you who want to know more about this, our sessions takes place on Thursdays. We start December 19, and then we have a small break for the holidays, and we continue on January 9 and 23 and February 6. These are 4 sessions, 2 hours each. And sessions takes place from 3 to 5 Universal Time. That's 4 to 6 Central Europe Time, CET. Right? Yeah. I also say, oh yeah, the program is $250 US, and you can pay through PayPal. And if you need it, you can pay into installments as well, no extra charge. So if you have any questions about today's presentation or the program, I'm available. Open your mic. We can talk about it. Oh, the questions are in writing. Good. So Fausto, so thanks, Alan, and everyone. Have to leave. Looking forward to seeing the sessions. Yes. Thank you, Carolina. Thank you, Paul. All right, you guys. So if there's no questions, thank you very much for today. I hope what we shared is and was useful. Thank you, Johnny. If you want to register, registrations are open. And any question you may have, I'm free to help you, and look forward to seeing you there. So this is the address, you can visit it. I'll be sending you the recording in a few hours. Thank you guys, I'll see you soon. Bye-bye, have a great day.